for that. We've had instances where we've tried using headhunters and we just never had success. But every time we go internally, we've had success. So I'm going to just relay some incredibly useful tools to you guys to hire. This is huge because this has helped us tremendously. Now, just imagine if you are putting a position out there and you have 600 people that apply within 4 days. It's an insane amount. And, how are you going to go through that? Well, this is how we do it.
Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode. Behind every well-oiled machine lies a wizard, meticulously orchestrating its seamless operation. In the world of multifamily syndication, that wizard is the operations manager, a true master of efficiency, finance, and strategic prowess. Join us as we pull back the curtain and uncover the magic behind this indispensable role. Today, we're joined by Ravi Gupta, COO and co-founder of Viking Capital. Welcome, Ravi.
Nice to be here, Nathan.
Always a pleasure. So let's just dive into it. Can you define what an operations manager role is in multifamily? Because a lot of the time when you think of an operations manager, it has to do with the product itself. So if you have, Nike, for example, their operations managers focus on the shoes and the athletics and making sure that the shoes are, at the factory on time, that they're transported on time. But it's a little bit different when it comes to multifamily syndication, since you already have kind of an asset manager that's looking over the assets itself. Kind of describe the role of an operations manager and kind of what role they play.
Yeah, absolutely happy to do that. First, I want to give you a bit of a background story about how this episode came to be. Many of you are familiar, or ones of listeners are familiar with Amanda Lovelace, who has unfortunately recently left us because she found something bigger and better, but she was so good at what she did. I mean, she was like a wonderful operations manager. In fact, we just gave her full reign to, do what she did best and help us operating in the back end. Now, these operations managers, they don't operate the properties, just to be clear. They're just operating Viking Capital Investments. So, the sponsor group basically of these individual properties. When you're looking at that level, you're talking about asset managers, property managers, and things. We're talking about just, the umbrella company. But this conversation will actually not just be suitable for a multifamily syndication company, but really any company that you're running. Because since Amanda has left, I spent a ton of time and energy in trying to figure out efficiencies and save money and do things with less staff, because Amanda did so much and she was leaving, and I had to figure out ways to divvy up the work. But then in that process, I found ways to actually stop doing some of the things or decrease redundancies and stop doing the things that she did. So this is an exciting episode because I will go through as much as I can, and hopefully those of you that own businesses that are listening to this will get at least one piece of information out of it. And if you can take action on some of these things, you can save thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. That's what we did as we went through this process. So to answer your original question, Nathan, what does a operations manager do in a multifamily syndication company? Well, it's pretty similar to other companies in a certain sense. This manager will oversee day-to-day operations, ensure the smooth running of the financial process, make sure we're in compliance, and oversee some strategic initiatives. This person also manages HR, manages the hiring process, bookkeeping, sometimes even investor relations. But typically, if you're big enough, you have an investor relations team. And then just for context, I'm just going to tell folks the teams we have in place. Currently, we had this operations manager position, obviously, and then we have an asset manager and we have an assistant to the asset manager. We have a VP of acquisitions, and then we have a senior acquisitions associate, which is you, Nathan. And then we have investor relations team, investor services team, and we have a marketing team. And we have people that help those teams as well. So that's in essence, in a nutshell, what our organizational structure is.
Yep. Absolutely. And the way I see this kind of ops manager fit into kind of all those different departments, that they really are kind of the glue and kind of the orchestrator, if you will, of all the different kind of, raises and closings and marketings and asset management. They're the ones that kind of bring all those different departments together and, operate under that same, as you said, that Viking umbrella. Can you go over what makes an operations manager so versatile and why it's important that they have kind of these different skill sets? Because it's hard to find somebody who is good at efficiencies and tech and finance and potentially investor relations. And so, what kind of ideal person would you be looking for to fill the role?
Yeah, Amanda was great in so many ways because she checked all these boxes. It's very difficult, as you mentioned, to find somebody that does this. But ideally, what you're looking for is someone with a financial background, financial knowledge, someone that's able to create efficiencies in any type of operation. So, for example, if you're in the marketing realm and you want somebody to oversee marketing and make sure that they're budgeting properly and they're using money wisely and that type of thing, this is where an operations manager comes in. They may not know the nuances of marketing, but they do know that, hey, look, you're spending this on Facebook advertising, this on Google advertising, and like I see there's a lot of spend on advertising. Maybe they ask the question, are you using that efficiently? What can we do to create efficiencies there or decrease spending? They look at other departments in that same way. They look at acquisitions, they look at asset management, they look at it from a budgetary perspective to see if they're spending money wisely, or ways that we can reduce expenses or even maybe increase expenses to create efficiency. So it would be someone with a good financial background, someone that is able to speak well with others. They have to have that. They have to be very personable because they're constantly interacting with staff, and then also sometimes investors, if the investors are calling them. They have to be very meticulous, but they also have to be people friendly. They have to have, as I mentioned, a good finance knowledge and good knowledge of bookkeeping, and they just have to be very well rounded. So they're just it's basically sort of like the I don't want to say waste basket because that doesn't sound right, but it's basically someone that can take on all these various things, that roles that kind of fall through, and put them together in a cohesive fashion, and just run the company that way.
Yep. Yeah. Especially, you want to find somebody who's innovative and who can take on problems and really truly problem solve. Because especially when you're in that kind of growth phase as a company, right? It's most likely that an operations manager is not be one of the first hires that you're going to hire kind of first off, right? You might hire an investor relations person to talk with investors. You might hire an asset manager to look over the properties. But once you kind of get to that growth phase, you say, hey, I have kind of the right team in place. Now I need kind of the glue to bring it all together. You need to find somebody who can recognize kind of systems easily, but then also has kind of the initiative to say, hey, there's a better way of doing this, or let's try and experiment in some different ways, right? So, initially when you were talking about the marketing budget and, allocating the right spend, a lot of folks don't even know, how their audience is finding them. What is the platform that has the highest ROI, or, can you reallocate your marketing budget to spend more efficiently on, a platform that seems to be getting you more qualified for investors, for example. So being able to recognize, hey, there's a system in place and the system is serving us okay for this kind of current moment, but where do we want to be in the future? And then what systems and processes do we have to, instill in the company to get us where we want to be as well? Can you go over some of the, you talked a little bit about the financial components. Are they running the entire finance department? Are they just kind of a small piece? Are they the ones that are doing the bookkeeping? What kind of role do they play on the finance side of things?
Yeah. And so what I'll do is I'll go through each of their responsibilities, and we can do this together. I'll go through what kind of efficiencies we put in place so that hopefully, as I mentioned earlier, you can get something out of this and maybe do this on your own. And even if you're a smaller company, some of these efficiencies that I'm going to mention will be beneficial, because ideally you want to work on the business, not in the business. You want to get others to work as much as they can in the business, so that frees your time for business development, for whatever you need to do. So let's talk about finances. First thing is bookkeeping. So in the past, our director of operations would bookkeep for us, and she maintained good records. But you could also get this done by a third party. So we looked through Upwork. We found a bookkeeper. We got recommendations from others as well, and we found one that works well for us, that we're teaching how to properly bookkeep. We had our previous operations manager create a bunch of videos to demonstrate how she did it, and this bookkeeper is doing very well. And the benefit of having someone that is an experienced bookkeeper, as opposed to one that you hire to do multiple tasks, is that person, if you're using Quicken, for example, knows the software in and out, right? Really can categorize things properly, track things properly. There may be some laws or things that operations manager may not know. I found that it made a lot of sense to outsource this and maybe have the operations manager oversee it if they have like a cursory knowledge of Quicken. So that's one. The second, in terms of financial responsibilities, is payroll and overseeing the different employees and really taking care of HR. So a good resource for this is Rippling. If you haven't heard of Rippling, look into it. A lot of companies I know use Rippling, and basically what Rippling is a one-stop shop for HR. So they take care of payroll, they take care of compliance, all HR compliance issues. The other thing is there's something called Rippling ASO. If you're big enough, if you're a small company, you don't need this, but if you're a big enough company and you need to make sure you're compliant or you're hiring in multiple states, then it's good to get this ASO system in place. And what they do is they make sure that you are compliant with in each individual state. So for example, in California and in New York, you have to make sure that your employees take certain types of training. If you don't, that you'll get fined, and the system creates the training for them, and they do that through Rippling. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to have a professional on board. And also there's a way you can communicate with an HR person. So if you're onboarding or if you're hiring or firing or doing whatever, you can go through their system and you have the most up-to-date and the most legally sound ways to take care of these various tasks. So I recommend, Upwork, as I mentioned, Rippling, as I mentioned, then also leverage your credit cards too. This is something that we didn't do fully and we're starting to do now. So we use the Amex Platinum Business. So if you go to the points guy and look at the best credit cards, Amex Platinum Business is almost always the top. And we use it all the time. I would absolutely recommend getting this card if you haven't, if you own a company, because number one, you get a great reward structure in place. But then number two, they have great customer service, and you can call their concierge and ask to arrange travel, and your employees can get cards too. So we've done that. They can arrange travel, they can arrange flights for property visits. They can even help you arrange a hotel, and say you're doing like a conference. They can help you arrange the conference in hotel rooms. So you can really leverage their concierge service to do a lot of the work for you. You don't need your operations manager to do that. And you're paying like a pretty inexpensive yearly fee for that card. It comes out to like $700. Expensive as far as credit cards go, but for what you get, it's actually a really good deal, because not only do you get those services that I mentioned, you get employee cards, which have no cost. They can use the concierge service. And then also you get access to, the different lounges and things in airports, which is super helpful. And then the final responsibility that I can think of that's very important and is used often is banking relationships. So call the bank that you work with and see if you can leverage their staff to do what you need to do. Because in the past, Amanda was doing a lot of this work, but then I called the bank that we use now, and their staff can help deposit checks. We don't in fact have to go to the bank or scan the checks, just mail them to them and they will deposit them for us, or help us opening accounts or help us answer questions, financial questions. We have one particular staff member we work with that can help answer financial questions from others. So these are different systems you can leverage, and that way you don't have to do it yourself, and you can potentially be the operations manager leveraging these systems so you don't have to do it.
Yep. And one of the core tenets, Viking is resourcefulness, right? Is having and using resources at your fingertips and using them wisely. But one thing I think that is a little bit overlooked when we're talking about operations manager, because the conversation can steer more in kind of the logical, financial kind of, realm, is that this operations manager really needs to understand the culture of the company too. You can come in and you can have this ops manager come in and be kind of like this, I've seen it before, this kind of like tyrannical ruler, almost to say, we're going to switch up all these systems, we're going to outsource everything, we're going to, cut down on the time it takes with how much they're talking about our sales team. But especially when you're talking about multifamily investing, for example, it takes time for a completely cold investor to warm up to the idea of who you are, maybe even to real estate investing, multifamily investing. And so those touch points, even if it says, hey, we need 9 to 12 touch points for this person to really feel comfortable with the company and move forward, an ops manager, just seeing that from the get-go, if they don't understand the business plan or if they don't understand the culture that you're in, could say, all right, great, let's find a way to cut down those touch points to 1 or 2 touch points and have these people directly invest. That would be more efficient. That would save us time and money. But that might not be, what's best for the health of the company or for the culture of the company too. So I think it's important that they really understand what your business plan is, what your core values are, and then build systems and processes around those that then can enhance the culture rather than just replace it.
Yeah. What you said, Nathan, is super important. Your operations manager has to fit the culture of your company. In fact, all your employees have to fit the culture. Otherwise, they're not going to be part of your company. And that's the number one, factor we look for in hiring. We don't care in certain roles. We don't care as much about experience, like this operations manager position. The experience in multifamily real estate is not as important as a cultural fit. If this person was incredibly well versed in multifamily but did not fit our culture, we would not hire them. That's the importance of that. And once you have someone that has that fits your company culture, then you can help them mold and shape things as you want them to. So that's another thing to consider. If you're looking to hire someone to do this, you don't have to they don't have to have the experience to do multifamily syndication or whatever you're doing in your company necessarily. As long as they have these basic things in place, basic skill sets in place, you can outsource a lot of this stuff very inexpensively to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have that quadrant, right, where you have kind of on one axis you have culture fit, and on the other axis you have skill set for the job. Ideally, you want to find people that are great culture fit and highly skilled. But there's going to be instances, and we've had this during interviews, where someone fits the culture great but may not have the skill set. And on the flip side, we've had people that have had a phenomenal skill set but haven't fit the culture. And kind of through the trial and error of all these interviews, of all these kind of positions that we've filled, what we found is that if someone is a good culture fit, it's a lot easier to teach them about kind of the skill sets of multifamily and the nuances there than it is to have somebody who's amazingly skilled at what they do, but then instill a culture that's not inherent to who they are as a person.
Yeah.
Really be doing a disservice to us and to them by hiring them, right?
Yeah, and I think that brings us to the next responsibility of the operations manager is hiring. Because if you are, as you're growing your company, you really want to do the hiring internally. The problem with external hiring and getting headhunters is that they don't have a clear understanding of your culture. They often will bring you people that are already in their fold, and they may or may not work, but they also charge a lot for that. We've had instances where we've tried using headhunters and we just have never had success. But every time we go internally, we've had success. So I'm gonna just relay some incredibly useful tools to you guys to hire, and this is huge because this has helped us tremendously. Now, just imagine if you are putting a position out there and you have 600 people that apply within 4 days. It's an insane amount. And how are you going to go through that? Well, this is how we do it. The first is, because that's happened to us. In fact, we've had 1,000 people apply for one position in the past. The first thing that we do is we use this tool called Wonderlic. So if you just search Wonderlic, you can look it up, and there's a subscription fee, per year. But what they do, and the NFL uses this too, interestingly, but what they do is they will evaluate people based on certain metrics. Like the first is how competent they are overall, and the second is how their personality fits, and then the third is based on the particular job, whether their performance will meet your standards. And they rank the person on a scale from 1 to 100, and if it's like 50 or better, then that's an okay metric to move forward. But if you see people that are very advanced, that it's only one data point, but the chances are they're going to be really good in that particular area. But that's an awesome screening tool because it takes 30 minutes to go through that process. I can tell you that about 50% of your applicants will not do it. They're just like, I don't want to do this. They don't care so much. If they don't care so much about the job, if it doesn't resonate with them, they're not going to do it. If the job is something that they really love, they will go ahead and do it. In fact, we had this one applicant that where we asked for the test, and they said, how do you expect me to spend 30 minutes doing a test and I haven't even gotten close to getting the job? This is ridiculous. And that was their reply. And I'm like, thank you for screening yourself out, because that's exactly what we don't want that person at all. So that's 50%. The next 50% comes from a DISC test. So once somebody does a Wonderlic test, we look up DISC, DISC. So that's a personality profile. Super important because you want the right personality to fit in the job that you have. Like, for example, you don't want a super analytical person being your salesperson because they need to be more people focused. You don't want a super people focused person being your analyst because they don't have that personality for it. We've certainly had people that have had bad DISC scores applying for a particular job, and it was a factor in our decision making. So again, but that's another screening tool, because once people do the Wonderlic, they're like, I don't want to do this DISC. It's another. They just will drop out. But people that really like the job will do it. So another way to get 25% of those people out. And then you have a number that you can work with where you can look at the resumes, you can screen them that way. Another tool again in hiring is using Upwork to get somebody to put all the resume information into a spreadsheet. So you put their name, their email address, some basic information in a spreadsheet. So if you want to email a bunch of people at once, you could just click and paste their emails. Again, that's somebody that's $15 an hour to do that. You can handle the hiring process pretty quickly with one person by getting all those things in place.
Yep. And that's key too, is using the tools you have at hand, right? Because you can have a Wonderlic, you can have a kind of a disc score, but if you don't really use them during the interview process, they don't serve you much good. And I've done that, multiple times where I had this Wonderlic score and I found, hey, your person was low on some metric. And I kind of, dug into that during the interview process and say, hey, what really motivates you? What's kind of your end goal here, to see if I could kind of pull more juice out of the Wonderlic score? Because as you said, it's just one kind of key metric, but it's useful to at least dig in there and get kind of further answers, especially prior to hiring. They always say that, right? Hire slowly and fire fast. You really want to make sure you're bringing the right people on board, especially if they're going to be the ops manager, that they're overseeing multiple departments and integral in finances and tech and all these different kind of nuances. You really want to make sure it's the right person that can pull all those pieces together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Harvey, can you, go over, hey, I'm thinking about hiring an ops manager and I'm in the real estate business. What would kind of their first 90 days on the job look like? What should they be paying attention to? What processes should they focus on? Really kind of what metrics would say, hey, this person was really successful in their first 90 days at the job?
Yeah. So what I've found, because we've hired and fired a lot over the past several years, what I've found is that somebody that is really good at that position will fit in very quickly. Like, you will know within the first, sometimes even couple days, whether this person's a good fit or not. There have been people where we've been like, they don't seem like they're a good fit, but we'll give them some time. That almost never works out. It seems to maybe like, one or two times I can think of where the person was slow to move, and then once they got in that position, they ramped it up a bit. But most of the time, you will know very quickly. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing you want to look for, is just to make sure that they are a good fit for the company. And if they're not a good fit, just as you mentioned, hire slowly, fire fast. You just want to let them know, like, hey, look, this is not working. We tried, and we got to move on. And it's better to do that than waste your time and energy and trying to get that person to work in a different way, a different capacity. So that's one thing we look for. And the other thing we look for, and what we do in the first 90 days is, number one, get them up to speed in our processes. So we use EOS, or the traction methodology. So if you're not familiar with traction, read that book. Gino Wickman's the author. It's called the Entrepreneur Operating System. It's a way to run your company very efficiently, so that you're looking at it from a high level and you don't have to check in with people daily. You don't have to stamp time sheets and things like that, which is crazy. But you make sure that they do their tasks. And if your employees do their tasks, then they can do whatever else they need to in their time, but they're hitting their metrics, and that's what's important. So it's a system to make sure that they're doing that. So we, in the first 90 days, we introduce the employee to that system. We get them up and running in our rippling system. We get them up and running in our shared drives and, our Kanban board. We have something called Asana, which is basically a Kanban board. If you don't know Asana or Kanban, look that up. It's a great way to keep organized. And we start assigning them various tasks and just get them up to speed. The first 90 days are crucial, because you'll really figure out whether the person's a good fit or not culturally, and if they can take the workload on of what you're giving them. And then after that 90 days, you'll know if they're a keeper or not, or even, as I mentioned, probably even before that, but certainly within that time.
And generally, if you're hiring, the right person for the role, within those first 90 days, once they get kind of a sense of the culture and the processes in place, most of the time, what I've seen is that they start to come up with their own ideas of ways to improve or things to experiment with, or different processes they could test. So I love that, when I'm seeing that first kind of 60 days, to say, hey, here's a process you're using for bookkeeping, for example. It's great, but I noticed that there's too much manual entry on this portion. I think we could create a system where, once a week you just have to upload the financials and they'll sort themselves out, and finance system is a different example. But, ways to be innovative and be creative, I think, is also a crucial skill, because you don't want somebody to just say, hey, here are the systems and let me kind of manage the systems that are in place. You want somebody who's going to really push the boundaries. And, we always say this, you want to experiment with kind of low cost experiments, and some experiments might not work out. Sometimes you might go a different direction and it might not be best for the company. We had that, multiple times with the CRM that we were using to manage, all the conversations that we were having. And it finally took us, a few years to find the right one that fit for us, that was giving us the right metrics that we needed. But we had to run multiple experiments with different companies and with different software systems, which took time, which took effort. But you don't really get to your optimal solution until you run those experiments and really kind of test the waters. So that's also a crucial kind of skill set that that person needs to have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it also depends on what you want as an operation manager. So if you have these systems that are completely in place and you're very happy with the way things are and you just want somebody to maintain status quo, that's different than if you are growing or expanding, you want someone to be in that growth mindset. So it just really depends. We're a growing company. We want somebody to have that growth mindset. We want somebody to help with operations, help develop our operations. But if you feel like everything is great, you just want somebody to like kind of check the boxes, you could really save a lot of money and hire somebody potentially part-time and do the things that use these tools that we're mentioning to you, and you'd be covered.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Robbie, it's clear this is a pivotal role as you're growing the company, the business. Any last kind of words of wisdom if someone is either in the process of hiring an ops manager or thinking about hiring one in the future?
Yeah, I would say really hash out the roles and responsibilities, because there's so many of them. This is one of the few roles where it's not completely black and white. There's a lot that could fit in this bucket. So you really want to hash out all those roles and responsibilities. Write down, prioritize those responsibilities and interview based on that. And once you hire someone that has the most of those boxes checked, you may be okay, because it's not, I shouldn't say impossible. It's very difficult to find someone that checks all the boxes, and you may need to outsource some of those responsibilities to others, and you can use the third parties that I mentioned. So, just to recap: Rippling for HR, Rippling ASO if you really want to be completely compliant. Oh, the other thing is, I didn't mention a virtual office. So if you don't have a virtual office, consider getting one. And many of the virtual offices have something called the anytime mailbox. That's great because oftentimes there's like so much mail that comes in. The worst thing for me in the world, honestly, it's akin to torture for me, is opening mail. For whatever reason, I would honestly rather have some like a digit removed than open mail on a daily basis, because it's so freaking painful. I don't know why. I actually went to the virtual office today, and they handed me a stack of mail, and I just handed it back to them. I said, I'm not opening this. I said, you open it. And what they should do is they should open it, scan it, put it into your inbox, and then you go through those and you tell them if you want to shred it, recycle, or you can download it and forward it on. So that's a huge help, and that's something that you don't have to do. Total pain in the ass to do. I would say use Upwork. Hire bookkeepers, hire help when you're hiring. Wonderlic, Disc Profiles I mentioned for hiring. Leverage American Express, because they're great for just general credit cards, but then also employee cards. The other thing that I didn't mention as well is bank accounts. I talked about banking, but if you in the past, our operations manager would actually book travel and pay wires and all that kind of stuff herself. But if you outsource that to your team and say, hey, look, in your silo of marketing or your silo of asset management, you do all the wires and we will oversee that. That is something that, it just creates efficiencies, and actually it gets people paid more quickly. And then also you can give them separate bank accounts. Like we have a marketing bank account that the marketing person has access only to that, and they can just wire out of that, and we can keep track of that. So instead of doing it ourselves, we can keep track of it, and the marketing team does that wiring. So that's another way you can create efficiencies. So that's in essence, in a nutshell, what you can do to improve your operations, leverage people that have the skill set that you need, and do a lot of the work that you don't have to do. And so you can hire a part-time operations person and be totally fine. Possibly if you're, a smaller company, you can maybe do it all yourself and leverage these services.
Yep, absolutely. And there's a whole continuum, right, of good operations managers and poor operations managers. For me, the ones that I found that are most successful are the ones that have a keen interest in tech too, some sort of technology, right? It's not an absolute requirement, but if you're able to find somebody who is actually interested in finding new technologies, finding efficiencies, being resourceful, that's typically the way that I found creates the highest efficiency, is an addition of some sort of tech or an up-leveling of tech. Now, obviously, you have to have the thought to be like, hey, we can't just institute every tech and every software underneath the sun. You'll have to find the right ones that fit for what you're trying to do. But at least there's somebody out there who is kind of scoping the landscape that is kind of at the forefront of these new techs. Like even, on site, we've had a phenomenal AI software that helps us with on-site property management, right? And you need somebody who can find those pieces of tech and really kind of integrate them and teach the rest of the employees about kind of the new softwares that are coming into play, because it's going to be pivotal to the growth of your company.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nathan. I'm glad you brought that up. Tech is shifting so rapidly. You need someone to stay on top of that. Absolutely. And one piece of tech that comes to mind is Fathom AI. So if you guys haven't heard of that, look it up. It's basically a device or AI software rather, that will add itself to your Zoom calls, and it'll record them, and it gives you an incredible summary. It's like someone took meticulous notes and categorized everything properly and then lays it out in a very legible way. And I use that all the time. Every meeting I have notes that are taken for me. In fact, I was just doing this week. I'm doing performance reviews with the staff, Nathan, as you know, because we did one together. And I used Fathom AI so that it took notes. And I used to take notes on all that stuff and put it in the records. But now I get Fathom AI to take those notes. I just cut and paste, put them in there, and it's better than any notes that I've taken in the past. And then you can refer to those. So that's one of thousands of ways you can use that program. But definitely look it up.
Yep, absolutely. We've seen one that could read all the mail for you now, and you can keep all your digits, right? Awesome.
Yeah, man, absolutely. If somebody can invent that, I will invest.
The next trillionaire is on the rise.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. We're in the process of getting our own ops manager on board. So hopefully we can do a follow-up episode and kind of see how that integration took place later down the line.
Absolutely.
If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe or a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.